In today's podcast of Data for All, help, I need data. Welcome to the Data for All podcast. I'm Charlie Yielding.
And I'm Charlie Apigian, where we want to empower you to think different with data.
So in our 9th episode, we're taking a different approach to what we're going to be doing today.
Okay.
And so throughout the episode so far, we've been building an image of data. We've been showing you like the different aspects of it, from creation to helping use it to make decisions and changes and whatnot. And so the overview has been pretty complete.
Yep, I'd say so.
But what we're going to do today is we're going to sharpen the image specifically on I need data. So where do we get it? How do we access it? Where does it live? What are the different types of places that it lives? What's accessible and what's not?
Yeah, because it's funny how we sit here and we talk about data all the time, and we never talk about the fact that where do you get it? When you get it, what does it look like? Where does it live for real? Like for real, not just on a random computer, or what does it mean? We said the cloud, we've explained that, but truly what that means today, so that if we're going to empower you to use data, then how can we do that if we don't tell you where to go and get data?
That's true. And it's not just on the the community level, like we talked about in the Airbnb episode.
Right.
It's also on the personal level too. So what do you carry around on your phone that you can use to empower decisions in your own life?
Yeah, and like usual, we're going to take the approach of how data works for you personally, how it might work within a company environment, as well as, of course, we have to talk community level data as well, since that's been a lot of our conversations over the first 8 episodes. So okay, let's get going with this. How about I take a little bit of a hard question at you?
Okay.
Here you go. All right. So we know we're going to go and get data. Why do you need data?
Because I want to know an answer to a question.
Okay. But always go back to, I'm going to use this word that starts with a G, ends with an L, goal. What is your goal? What is your goal and the true intent? And do you need data for that decision? And a lot of people, it's more about the severity of the decision. If it's huge ramifications, they want data to back up that decision. But a lot of times people are just fine with, the gut type of approach when it's small little decisions throughout. So understanding the magnitude of the decision can a lot of times just help you decide if you actually need data and what type of data that you need. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have an idea of where that line is?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, to be honest about it, so I think every day is trial and error when it comes to what do I need to make a decision. And remember, when we've defined data, it is not columns and rows, right? It's not just, the fact that it's a numerical value living somewhere. We believe that conversations are also parts of data that we're using. It's obviously, there's so many different ways that we can think of data, and it's really just the capturing of an imperfect view of reality. And so whenever we capture something about reality, it's good to use that to make decisions. But and we're going to talk about sleep today, so I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek. Do I need data to know that if I get 3 hours of sleep and it was loud and I got woke up 5 times, I did not have a good night's sleep? I don't feel like I have to go back to a data source to know where I am, and then that's going to help me decide what a couple of the next things I'm going to do are in that. But if instead I want to look at sleep patterns over a month or a year, it's probably better if I have data to back that up.
Yeah, and as we'll find out when we get into it, your interpretation of 3 hours of sleep is that's easy.
Yeah.
But if you're in the bed for 8 to 9 hours, like how much of that is quality sleep, and how much benefit are you actually getting by hitting your cycles, and how much do you know about what your cycles should be? And there's a lot that goes into using data. And a lot of it also comes from understanding. But like I said before, data will give you, well, if you don't already have the question, data will give you the questions to ask specifically about the subject that you're dealing with too.
Yeah, and I think, well, just to let everybody know, you heard our Christmas episode, which was episode 8, and I went and bought the Oura Ring. So now I have this amazing data, and in looking at that, I've only obviously seen a little bit of that data since getting it, but it really is insightful. And I'm going to talk about also data. Sometimes by getting data, it allows you to understand what you want to learn. Mm-hmm. Because you've seen this incredible insight from data. And I think we'll get into that more into episode 10. But if we go back to, we've talked about, I think it was all the way back in episode 2 where data can be stored. Mm-hmm. But let's give that primer again. Like you said, we're trying to sharpen the image of what data is and how we can use it today. So where do you, when you think of data and where it is stored, what are some things that come up in those terms?
So for me, it's always mobile devices. I have some experience with like SQL and stuff like that, but all of my stuff is just, it lives in the cloud, on my device, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to jump in and say, so we're gonna break this down in 2 separate modes. Like we've got personal level, and then we could have talked about like business level stuff, but instead we're just gonna do the community level, because I find that community level stuff to be fascinating.
Yeah,
like you've just in the course of this podcast, you've opened my eyes to exactly what we have access to right now. I never would have known that Airbnb had data that we could just go get and look at, and then make, I think through that podcast we made some pretty good decisions for how to rent an Airbnb out in Nashville.
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a difference between publicly available data from a company and publicly available data from a community, you know. And so we'll definitely, I think, get into that. Even use little acronyms like API, AWS, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so when you think of, that's interesting how when you think of data, you're always going the mobile route, because that's actually what you do is mobile devices. Where my mind goes to more the traditional route, which is databases, data warehouses. Yeah. And so when somebody says, well, where do you store data? I'm always thinking it's either and I'll break it down into the different aspects of where data can be stored. The first is just a flat file, right? You just have an Excel file. It lives on your computer. That is technically data stored. And I'm thinking more of the traditional numerical data.
Sure.
The second then would be a database. And you hear things about what is a database. And a database, if you think about it, it's kind of like having a bunch of flat files. And I say flat files, if you open up Excel and you're on a worksheet, that is one view of data. It's got rows, it has columns. The columns, I think, are the letters, and then the numbers are the rows. And so if you're in C3, that is 3 columns over the 3rd row. That we all know what Excel is, and if you don't, we're teaching you as we go, right, folks? And so that one worksheet, think of that as a snapshot of data. A table is another way of saying that. So a database takes a bunch of tables and connects them into one large file that can live somewhere. And usually they're, they can be enormous. But what makes that helpful is it's what's called a relational database, which means I can have data about Charlie Yielding, and then if he buys a lot of stuff from us, that is in a separate place. But I only have one file or one record of Charlie Yielding in my system. And then every time he makes a purchase in a different place, I log that, but I connect it back to Charlie. So that's a relational database. So if you make 5 purchases from my company, and I always go to sock companies. I buy way too many socks in this world. I've got more wool socks than I think anybody out there. And so I have a sock company. You buy socks from my company, Charlie. And if you've made 5 purchases, then you are 5 records in my order table. but you're only one record in my customer table. So we can have multiple tables that connect together through this magical thing called relationships. And we're not going to get more into it today than just that. But that's really what a database is. It's this one large file with multiple tables in there that connect together.
So, a quick question about tables is a lot of the function of a table to help keep the data organized in a way that's easier to analyze or easy to look at?
Yeah, and usually two-dimensional. So you when I say two-dimensional, you'll have records, like the number
X,
of
Y.
columns, the number of rows would be your records. So if I have 15 customers, I have 15 rows. But then whatever attribute about that customer, the first name, the last name, the address, those are now columns. So that's why if you think of it as two-dimensional there, but then of course you have this new component, which is, okay, but now they're going to buy things from us. And oh, by the way, we also have products, and we have, other aspects of the experience that we want to keep. All of that we want to live in only one place, but then connect together so that when I say Charlie Yielding, he has made 5 purchases, and those 5 purchases have been knee-high wool socks.
Yeah.
Knee-high wool socks. What the heck?
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I do have some knee-high wool socks for skiing, though.
Oh, well, there you go. I just sold you a pair of knee-high wool socks for skiing. And I wear them just for fashion, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there we go. What are some of the different types of files? I think it's important just to mention that. Oh,
I wanted to interrupt you for a second. So you've said something that I've never heard about as relates to data before, but you talked about a 2D image, or a table represents a 2D image, which is just X, Y. So are you, instead of painting a picture with data, are you more constructing a hologram by comparing the tables?
That's a good way of thinking. But yeah, because it is kind of the 3-dimensional approach, because each person that's a row can have multiple orders, and that would stack on. So there's a lot more data about somebody that's had 10 orders as opposed to just 5 within your database.
Okay.
So sort of, but I think of a way to paint the picture here is, again, I see 2 dimensions. You have attributes or columns, and then you have observations or records, which are your rows.
Yeah.
And so those are your kind of like your XY axis there.
Another way that I'm envisioning it is like you've got a traditional old school notebook, and each page is gridded out, and you're just writing on it, and each page represents a table, and then technology, databases, has enabled us to look at every page at once.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and
make the
connected.
connections.
Yeah. And what makes that really helpful, again, is I can go into a database and say, I need to find Charlie Yielding in every order that he's ever placed with us, and it all comes up, instead of going to an Excel file and knowing Charlie's customer number and then doing a filter and then doing all of that. No, I don't. It makes it so much easier, especially when there are tens of thousands of customers and millions of orders, and we of course know there are companies where that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a relational database.
That would be a relational database. Now, a relational database can be local. You can have a relational database sitting on your computer. Going back to the old days, I think the first year I taught Microsoft Access. If you haven't even heard of it, you wouldn't be the only one, but it is the Microsoft Office version of a database. And I used to literally teach that at a master's level back in 2002, I think.
How very fancy of you.
Yeah. I probably have never mentioned this before, but my first database I ever developed, did I ever tell you what that was? Like, for real, I've never told you?
Is it the baseball stuff?
No.
No, then I don't
No.
know then.
Oh gosh. Well, this is a cool little story. Let me. So back in 2002, I came to Middle Tennessee State University, and one of the professors had a campaign finance consulting company, and he said, "Hey, we want to create a database so that we can track finance dollars in Illinois." And I'm like, okay. And so we went through it. We had to figure out the whole schema for it. We had flat files of who gave what in the state of Illinois. We put that all into one big database. And the reason we were doing it was because there was one of their clients was running for Illinois senator. I seriously have never told you the story. Oh, this is good. This is my first database. So they wanted it to be Microsoft Access because back in, again, like 2002, 2003, what were people using on the campaign finance? Well, they had Microsoft Office and they wanted to have that stuff right there. The internet we didn't have mobile phones out on the road with us that we could connect to an internet connection. So they had to kind of think of what they were doing there. So anyways, was building this out specifically for this one person, and it ended up where I made $2 an hour based on, because I did a flat fee because I didn't know. I mean, I'm 29 years old-ish, and I was like, whatever. I just wanted the experience because I knew I was going to be teaching it. And so I gave them, here's how much. And then they just kept adding all these things to it. Well, the person's going through running for Illinois senator. He was going to lose. And the person he was going against had a huge scandal against him, dropped out like a month before the race. The person that replaced him was Mike Ditka on the other side.
The Bears coach?
The Bears coach.
Oh.
So this guy that we were representing, he had a funny name. Have you ever heard of it? It's Barack Obama.
Okay.
Seriously.
Heard of him.
You've heard of him?
Yeah.
He's the one that was running for Illinois senator. He was the person, and that was my first database.
What?
Like my first real database outside of, other things, was one specifically for Barack Obama.
Neat.
And when he won, because he obviously won, I was in Chicago at a conference, and they're like, Charlie, you want to come to the party? And I'm like, I don't want to go to some guy named Barack Obama's party. And I didn't go to his election win party. And so I never got to meet him. But I created his little itty bitty database. So that was my first one. And that was a database where if you went into Microsoft Access, it looked like Excel worksheets.
Yeah.
But then you could go to a spot where visually you could connect them. And say, hey, this one, again, go to the customer orders things. This customer ties to the order table, and the way we're going to do that is through this one field or attribute. And that's really what a database can be. Most people probably will not know or see databases, but you're touching them every day. You go to Amazon.com, you're in a database when you click on your account.
All the stuff that we've talked about to this point, like all the cookie information that's being captured is just directly put straight into a database, right?
Everything on the internet is living in a database somewhere, but those will be, of course, cloud-based files usually. Now, they might also live on-prem, which means at a premises. So if you ever hear on-prem, what we're talking about is it's locally stored as well. And some of the file names you'll hear of is like, there is a .SQL. SQL is structured query language. There's MySQL. There's SQLite if you just start dabbling into it. And that's something that I'll use if I want to just create a quick little database on my computer. But a lot of the times what you'll see is when you get an export of data, and this is important for today, it is going to probably be a pretty generic file, and it's usually a separated values file. So I'm saying separated values because you'll see a CSV, you'll see TSV files. CSV is the most common.
Yeah, and it's common, right? I mean, it's
comma. So comma separated values. So think of a large text file, and then every attribute or column is in one row, and it's separated by commas. And so that can be read in almost any application known or that has ever been built.
And we have a partner that's still using a legacy piece of software. And so we have to do CSV drops to an SFTP site in the year 2022. but those files are they're wonky to look at. And the TSV is tab separated values.
Tab
right?
separated, yeah. And those are the two. And the reason you want tab separated versus comma is if you know your data has a bunch of commas in it, it can get a little bit wonky. Yeah. And so, but the thing is, if you are going to download data from your health app, or you're going to your bank and you want to download all of your transactions, save it as a CSV, and you can open it in Pages. You can open, and that's the Apple version of Excel. You can open it in Excel. You can open it in pretty much anything.
Probably Google Sheets too, right?
Definitely Google Sheets. Yeah. Now, the reason you want a CSV as opposed to an Excel file. So, do you know that? You ever understand why you'd want one versus the other?
From my experience, it's formatting. Like to make sure that everything, like if you write a if you put Excel the data in a specific spot, it'll always be in the same spot if you use TSV versus an Excel, because as soon as you convert Excel to Pages, you lose stuff, right?
You can. And an Excel file has a lot of metadata baked into it, which sometimes is really good. So a lot of times with CSV files, dates get screwed up. And so you have to do some converting. And when I'm saying it gets screwed up, a lot of times it's when I'm pulling it into something that's not Excel.
Right.
So I'm pulling it into Python. I'm going to write some scripts against it, things like that.
Is that a snake?
It is a snake. It is also the best programming language for what I do, which is the data stuff. And so we've got to have this, we got to talk. We got to really get into the weeds on data science in our season 2, which is almost here. I can't believe it. We're almost at 10 episodes. We always were dreaming, folks, that we were going to get to 10, and we're almost seeing the finish line now. But so Python is a programming language, and what I can do is I can import data into it, and then I can manipulate it in different ways.
Using code, though.
Using code, and I wouldn't encourage that to be people's first foray into data, but it is a great programming language. But regardless, when I bring in a large file, I could bring in, let's say, a 10 gigabyte file. If it's an Excel file, it might take a minute to load, maybe even 5 minutes to load. A CSV would take 10 seconds.
Cool.
And the reason is because it doesn't have all that other stuff with it. It doesn't have all that other metadata. And so that's why I'm always, if I have a choice between an Excel file or a CSV and I know what I'm doing with it, I almost always download CSV. So if you go to a website and you're downloading data, clicking .csv will always get you something that can be read on your computer.
So when you go to the website and download the data, is that technically scraping, or is scraping a definition that's more specific?
Yeah, I think of that as something different.
Okay.
Usually when we say web scraping, what you're doing is you're literally going to a page and just pulling out the data components and putting it into a readable format.
That's cool.
Yeah, a great example is the Airbnb data that we have that technically is being scraped. Or it could have been from an API. Actually, I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up, and we'll talk about the difference between web scraping and API. Well,
we're here.
We're here. You might as well. So an API is, and I'm going to say exactly what it is. I actually wrote it down.
I always forget.
I know, I do too. Application Programming Interface. But anytime you see that, it's basically a way to get data directly. And so there'll be rules set up and things. So Zillow or Spotify, even Yelp, I love Yelp because it's about food, as well as Airbnb can have an API set up where if you get basically a unique identifier, which will be like a username and a token, and then you follow their steps, you can download directly from them. And Zillow's really good about that and have had things in the past. And it changes all the time. So I could not sit here today and tell you how to download data with an API because everybody's website will be different. But usually you get some pretty cool stuff.
I bet.
If you can't get that, what you can then do is web scrape. And so that means if there's data that's being put on a web page, you can use scraping tools, and again, like Python programming would be a way to go and do that. There's something called Beautiful Soup. That's the library that allows you to do some scraping. And there's other ones. You need requests and a couple other ones. But using those, you can scrape directly from that page. And if you do it in a specific way, if there's like 10 pages of results, you know, and you're only seeing one, it'll go through and scrape all of those pages. So it gets you a pretty good set of data by also doing some scraping.
And it's not looking at the visual output of the website. It's looking at the code for the website, right?
That's right. Yeah. Behind the scenes, if you are in Google Chrome, you can click on developer tools and actually, I think it's inspect element, and it would bring up the code, and then you would actually see that data at that point.
So every now and again, I hit the hotkey for turning it on.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Every time I do that, I feel like a freaking hacker.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, this is how I experience the internet.
Oh, yeah. And you see HTML and CSS all built in, but then you'll see where the data actually is being pulled from. And it does do a really good job. So, but which all of that being said, again, you have flat files, you have a database where you can think of connected flat files live. That can be local, that can be within the cloud. And then, of course, ways to get it can be through either just normal downloads. Like, you know, you go to your bank, it'll say export here. You click that, you put in the date range of the transactions, and then a lot of times it'll say what format, and you can download maybe a QuickBooks file because they have a specific file extension, an Excel file, or a CSV. And when in doubt, download the CSV. CSV you can always upload to QuickBooks and what other financial application you're using.
Okay. So to go back to it, though, you've got the APIs that allow you to build a tunnel from the company's data or the public data to your program, which in this case is Python.
Yep.
And that tunnel has like stop signs and red lights and all this other kind of stuff that dictates like how you interact.
That's
and
right.
what specifically you can pull and stuff, right?
Yeah, and realize you're not getting direct access to their database.
Right.
You're getting a snapshot that they're willing to share.
Yeah, walled garden.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times, and you think about that, like, yes, with that API, if there is one for Airbnb, or however inside Airbnb.com gets their data, which I know they have the methodology on the website. When you are pulling directly from that, you can see the address of actual homes.
Yeah.
Directly on there.
Yeah, we were talking about this before, and
Yeah.
it freaked me out because I would have thought addresses were PII, which is personally identifiable information, because some people on Airbnb live in the houses that they rent out.
But if it's on a website, if the address is on a website, then it's something that is not PII at that point. It's known. What you don't see is who owns the home directly from Airbnb. They will not do that. So you're not going to find out that Charlie Yielding has a house in Nashville that he's now renting out for bachelorette parties, like we already have established. I think that was episode 3, wasn't it?
That I will go with what you say.
Yeah, and how is the bachelorette parties going? Are you the host? Are you there when they get there? And
the wine is always out on the counter.
the wine. Oh, he remembers the features that mattered the most. Look at that. He still remembers that. That's great. And so the data that you get, so you can see individually things. But what they don't do is give you all of the individual transactions, but they give it to you in aggregate. In other words, the percentage of certain things. So Airbnb is willing to allow you to see certain things about each home, but not everything.
So I have a question it's kind of a left turn here, but why would they do that? Like, why would it interest Airbnb, or why would they put in the effort to make it available?
Great question. It's really about the developer community. Think about this. If I give an API to my data, now if you create an app, you might include that data, which then gives me the publicity kind of thing that could be out there. So, I can't think of a specific app, but making weather data available through an API. Now, Carrot Weather or one of the different apps out there is using that, and they are saying it's from Forica or whatever the different one is. So it's a way to help the developer community. It's also, they get a ton of requests. And they want to work with developers, so might as well just make an API and then just say, go to the API and get the data.
Okay. So it's beneficial in that way. Is Access ever put behind a paywall?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually spent the money on specific ones, and a lot of times what it will be is it'll be tiered. Here's the free version.
Yeah.
Like you can go to Zillow right now and get the free version.
Yeah.
I guarantee you can also pay a lot of money to them to get better data, because like the real estate companies are going to want better data than what we're going to want. So they should pay for that.
So every business or every person that works in business that's listening to this right now, your data is valuable already.
If there's any sage advice out there, it is your data is very, very valuable. And it's why we can talk about data in a podcast, because it's going to continue to be a very valuable thing.
I've been trying to get that point across for a while, and it's just I feel like I was ahead of the curve a little bit, but it's right behind me. Now, I'm not ahead of the curve like Zach was or is.
Yes.
But I'm slightly ahead.
And if your data is not valuable, then you're going to have to pay a lot more for what you get on your phone, what you get on your computer, because it has to be paid some way. And so there's different currencies out there. One is literally cash or money, and the other one right now that's really big in the tech space is the data itself. And so you're right. And so, it's, are you willing to pay $300 a month for Spotify, or are you willing to let a little bit of your data go and know that that's augmenting the price?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna finish up the data stored part.
Sure.
I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, because I really want to get into some actual examples of what we do. The one thing that I think I'd like to mention here is, because there's buzzwords out there that just nobody knows what they really mean, but I'm going to try to break it down pretty simple. And it's data, and then you put the word. Is it a data warehouse, a data lake, a data cathedral? I love that one.
Is that real?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that.
I'm going to give a big shout out to my good friend over at Qlik. Qlik is Qlik, by the way, Dalton Ruhr. He's kind of like, to me, the guru of data storytelling, because I started seeing his work like 10 years ago, before I even knew Zach. And he's the one that says, I build data cathedrals. And I'm like, what is that? And he makes a joke of it because so many people are coming out with all these different words. So I think it is a real thing. But a data warehouse to me is nothing but a collection of databases. So a flat file, when you have a lot of those, goes into a database. But then databases, different ones, can connect together. And that's usually what a data warehouse is.
Okay.
So I have a data warehouse, and that's where we put all of our community level data. So I get the database from ACS data or from multiple places, and then I'm connecting all of these data sources together that were not intended to be connected initially.
Right.
Right. Because if it's a database, the whole intent was creating that database, because Amazon, let's say again, has customers, they have orders, they need all of that to live in one sort of location.
Yeah, you're taking data that creates two separate perspectives and putting it together.
Yes, so I can take my data warehouse, I'm taking crime data that's from one source, and then education data from another source, then health data from another source, and I'm connecting that. And when I integrate all that together into one data source, that's a data warehouse.
Cool.
And so if you hear data lake, data warehouse, they're pretty much still synonymous with each other.
Well, I think that's the most confusing thing is that the vocabulary isn't settled on. And so if a data cathedral's out there, then it's just like that's more confusion for the folks who are on the outside. And so that's good to know that flat files or tables combined makes a database.
Yep.
And then a collection of databases that are connected via API, or is it just a part of the same system?
To simplify it, think of one location where you're putting these databases.
Okay.
And so really it's just, think of a data warehouse as a way to collect data from a bunch of different sources and connect it all together.
Yeah.
And so if you hear other terms, just know that the probably the most common one is going to be data warehouse.
Okay. So data warehouse, data lake, data pool, data cathedral. And so it's all just a collection of databases.
In most cases, yes.
I made one of those up. I don't know if anybody
Data pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You caught it, I know.
Yes. Because I'm trying to think. I was like, is there really a data pool?
There could have been.
Yeah, who knows?
See, you're the expert.
Yeah. And in most cases, data warehouses will be in the cloud. They'll be, and the big players are going to be Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. So Google has Google BigQuery. And that's actually what I'm using right now. And I really like it. It's intuitive. I've used AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, also very intuitive. And then there's Microsoft.
Oh, yeah.
Microsoft's getting better. It's getting a lot better. And you'll hear their Azure platform. The one thing that we're seeing with Microsoft is most government agencies are using Microsoft Azure, and they have actually been certified by the government from a security standpoint to be used. So you're seeing more of your community type data is actually being stored in Microsoft Azure.
We have clients that require Azure over AWS.
Yeah, and I see that. And the reason I make fun of Microsoft, it's not their fault. They started before there was the internet. And so everything they've done has had to be retrofitting for what today's environment looks like, where Google and Amazon, at least Amazon from the Amazon Web Services perspective is, a little bit on the newer side and definitely part of the internet generation.
You can tell when you look at AWS that it was built from the ground up with its intent in mind.
Yeah.
Whereas on the Microsoft side, I will say that Microsoft is definitely making progress towards that holistic, like everything's kind of in the same spot and works the same way and connects and all that kind of stuff. But they do have a long road still ahead of them.
Well, and to I've used all three, and I would use all three again. I there's no the parts that were wonky for me, if that's a term, which we're saying it's a term today. In Azure, I had a lot of workarounds that it didn't work exactly perfect. I'd have to figure out some things where it just worked in the others because again, it was being retrofitted. And now that was 4 years ago when I used Microsoft Azure. Maybe today those things are gone.
It has come a long way.
Yeah,
for sure. Because their shift has been like will be a single platform in the cloud.
Yeah. All right. So we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about fun stuff. Let's get into data. Like, okay, we want to talk about individual and specifically more of the community type of data. You want to start with individual?
Yeah. So what I was thinking is like we've talked about how you do all that stuff with the bigger data and whatnot.
Sure.
And so on the personal level, like we got to talking about this the other day and we decided that like we have to do a whole episode just dedicated to this. But for right now, top level view, it's good to have cloud storage for personal. So if it's Drive or Google Drive or iCloud or some sort of online storage or cloud-based storage, that's the best way to do it. And so I had a question that was going to tie this all together. So if I create a spreadsheet and put it in Google Drive, we'll just say, or OneDrive or whatnot, was that a database? But then based off of like the rest of the conversation, that's not a database. That's just a table sitting in a cloud drive.
That's just a flat file.
Okay.
Yeah, I think of it. I use the term flat file because that could be a Word document, that could be an Excel file just the same. So,
Okay.
so it allows me to be very generic when I say that.
Okay. So on the personal level, though, like, do you think that we would get into a position on a regular basis where we would need Python skills to analyze the data that we hold ourselves?
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
I think you'll have the tools are getting so much better and so much more intuitive, and drag and drop is becoming so much easier to do. So drag and drop just means that it's a graphical user interface that allows me to connect things together or to do the work that I normally do in data. Where programming becomes important is every time you get into something that is kind of a niche, and it's just, I'm going to do this for what I need, and it's got to be a certain way. And, there's something to, when you standardize something, you lose some of the ability to customize. And so that's where programming comes in. So you're always going to need people that know how to program, but to truly get insights that are used to be actionable. Do I need to become a Python programmer? Probably not. To do data science, the reason you need programming skills is for cleaning data more than machine learning algorithms.
And cleaning data is organizing it in a way that's useful, right?
Organizing it, and we like to say scrubbing it, because you'll have data that just, the city name Murfreesboro. If I, how do you spell that? Trust me, and you get into a database where people can type that in, it's 50 different ways.
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out ways. All right, how do I do that so that Murfreesboro is spelled the same way? And then you have to go into some maybe more customizable type things. But and so in talking about the data and where it's stored, I think it is important to talk about local, cloud, and then hybrid for a second. And I'm talking about this for you personally.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, you have data that's stored just on your computer, I'm assuming.
I don't.
You don't? Okay.
Well, I have games and stuff like that, but all my personal data is in the cloud.
It's a hybrid though, correct?
It is, because in theory, yeah, it's how OneDrive and Google Drive and all that kind of stuff works. If you install the app on your computer, then you can have the files locally and they save automatically to the cloud. And so it's built-in redundancy.
Yes.
So I've got the files on my computer that I can manipulate, but they're technically just images of what's actually on the internet or on the cloud.
And they're connected in terms of like revision history. In other words,
Right.
the minute you change a file locally, it automatically changes in the cloud. If you change it in the cloud, it automatically updates locally as well.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by hybrid. So if it's just cloud-based, that means the data only lives in a cloud somewhere, not on a hard computer that you own.
Right.
And so then every time you need it, you have to stream it, you have to download it, but you're technically downloading it only as a temporary in that application. So like I open an Excel file directly from a cloud-based storage area, it'll bring it in, it'll see it, but the minute I save it, it saves to the cloud, but not locally. That would be cloud only. Most of us just realize you use Dropbox, OneDrive. Those two in particular will be the hybrid approach usually. Google Drive, though, that's pretty much cloud only, right? You don't.
So
are you able to save locally?
I thought if you downloaded the app, you could, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't. I've only been using that as the browser-based version, which means I'm only getting it in the cloud. So I think that's important to know. So if you have a Dropbox account, you can go in and say, I want to keep this local only. I want to keep it in both places, or I want to keep it online only. And you should do that, because there's some files, if you never need them again, but you want to keep them and you're okay for them to be in the cloud, then put them there and take them off of your computer. But they're always there when you need them.
Well, so we're loose on the data term, and so pictures are one of the most important things that you have. And so if you've ever lost a hard drive, like, so nowadays everybody uses solid state drives, but if you don't keep a solid state drive plugged in, like if you shelf it, the data can corrupt over time. Like they need constant power. So long-term storage is better on disk drives, and we all remember disk drives. Like they start making a noise, and then your computer dies.
That's it.
And then hopefully somebody will be able to recover the information that's on those disks, because it's physically written on those discs. And so I lost some pictures in the early aughts, and so I hate that. And I like to, or as soon as I could, I got into that kind of hybrid approach. And so my pictures live in 3 different places. My passwords live in 3 different places. My files live in 3 different places. It's all
2 cloud, 1 local, or is it 2 local, 1 cloud?
It's 1 local, 2 cloud.
Okay.
And if I were going to get extra fancy with it, I would have a separate set of disk drives connected to my home network.
Yeah.
That would act as my like primary shared drive.
And that's kind of what I was getting to. Do you actually have where you have, backup somewhere locally? I don't either. And I'm the same way. And depending on what it is, determines, like pictures are probably my most cherished file by far. If I lost an Excel file, you can make that up. I can never retake a picture from
Same.
2005.
Yeah.
So that to me has to live in 2 places in the cloud. And then the only reason I keep them locally is if I want access to them. Because with Dropbox, if you put all your pictures there, you can still see them on your computer, but you see the icon as opposed to the image of, you know what I mean? So it doesn't show you, if it's you and your son at a baseball game, it won't show you that. You'll show you the name unless it's local. If it's on your computer, then you see the preview image. And so those are the only drawbacks of keeping it online only.
That's true.
Something like Dropbox.
But I feel like that's a must for these days on a personal level.
Yeah, remember, data is an imperfect view of reality, right? A capturing of an imperfect view of reality. What is a better capturing of reality than an image? So to me, pictures are absolutely data points that are really important to make better decisions a lot of times, or just to feel good about, I love my Day One app. And the reason I love it is the pictures that I put in there. And that's probably my 4th place then that I have images is in Day One.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but only very, very specific ones. Okay, I know we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but why not? That was fun to talk about. So what think of data sources that you have that are for you individually. What are some of those?
Well, so coming off of the storage, the main thing that I use is the Health app in iOS. And so I use that. I wear my watch to track my sleep. And so I track sleep, heart rate, respiratory stuff. And I usually just, like, it lives in a database, obviously, but the way I interact with it is just through the app.
Yeah. Now, did you actually went to try to download that data?
I did export all my health data.
All right. So how was that? Where did you start to do that?
So I went to the Health app. And
okay.
My phone is actually recording right now, so I can't get in. But
that's right.
I go to the Health app, and I'm trying to do this from memory. And I think you just scroll down all the way to the bottom, and it says export data.
Oh, I've never exported directly from there. Where I will download health related stuff is through my running apps. So I actually have I think I have it automatically downloading the generic stuff about every run directly into a Google sheet. And that just keeps logging. And I just keep it there. I never look at it, or anything like that, but, you can easily download like all of your runs and things like that. So what are some of the different, so did it just download as a CSV file?
No, when I hit export, it gave me a zip file because there were, and so we were talking before this, full disclosure, because there were file types that I'd never seen before. And so one was GPX or something like that. And so it takes all of my recorded workouts, all of my biometric features or I guess not features, my biometric points.
Yeah.
And it sends that out. And every time I took and there's a separate piece too for EKGs, because since the Series 6, I think, iWatch, you can do EKGs with by touching the dial or whatnot. And so I do that on a semi-regular basis. And so it spit all that stuff out. And that one was weird because it came in Excel, and there were 15,000 numbers in one column. And they're all like 3.25 and negative 2 point whatever. I was going to get you to look at it because I have no idea.
Just one column? Or was there a unique identifier to go with it?
It's one column with 15,000 rows roughly in each row or each cell has a number that's
All right,
small.
there has to be some way to connect that. But let's take that back to the database idea. So you get all these different files. Why? Because somewhere in a database, there is one record that says Charlie Yielding, just one. And then you have Charlie Yielding per day. And so there's a day record in a different table for Charlie Yielding. And so like January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd. Now what happened on January 1st? You went for a walk. So now there's a new file in a different table that's connected to that day, that's connected to you. And so how does it know that that one GPX file is connected to Charlie Yielding? It's because of a relational database.
Okay.
And that's why you have all these different files, but all these different files are technically a database.
So the Excel file I was talking about with my workout data earlier that I manually enter is a table, but now I actually do have a database because I downloaded and exported that, or I exported and then it extracted all of those files that have the relational, like.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I do have a database.
Yeah, and then if you wanted to create your own, as long as there's a way, unique identifier. So it has to be a column that says Charlie Yielding's number somehow that connects it back. And if you do that, or something, a date, right? As long as there's a date in the GPX file, then that can tie to your database. And yeah, you can recreate that database yourself. And by the way, a GPX file is actually a map file. So if you took that and uploaded it to like Google Earth, it would literally show you the map, and it would probably show you the route that you took that day. And I love looking at those files.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to do that because I'd never had a need to export it before.
Nice.
Because like the app shows you basically everything you need to know too, because you can look at all your old stuff. But to the point you were making earlier, like if you wanted to get creative and answer your own questions that maybe the app couldn't, then it's definitely going to empower you to do that.
So, the whole reason I did download from Strava, which is my running app initially, was because I imported all that into Python and did a bunch of analysis.
Oh, your own?
Yeah, I did. But when it became really good is when I integrated other data sources with that, weather and things. And so I had this pretty elaborate data science problem, basically, of how can I make Charlie run faster? And you know what the algorithm told me? Tough. You're not going to run faster. You're getting old. Forget it. That's what literally the Python program spit out to me. No, but I did see certain things because I was also from a different thing, MyFitnessPal, which is another app that allows you to track. I was tracking calories back then. And so I was able to see the number of calories within today. And then I was able to also see the day before. And then I was seeing the number of calories or macros in a specific day. Did it affect a run the next day? And then I had to create additional data based on that. I'm getting way too much in the weeds here, but it's kind of fun because what is my baseline? And then was I better today? Was I worse? And then I created a model to determine what would make me better, what would make me worse on a specific day. And here's something I found out really interesting. And again, anybody that's a exercise enthusiast, you don't eat a lot the day before an event. So if you're going to run a marathon on Saturday, Friday is not your load day because that's too late. All you're doing is bloating yourself, making you feel sluggish. You want to feel light for a run, don't you? But you also want the maximum number of carbohydrates in your body, all that kind of stuff.
You're min-maxing your run.
Yeah, absolutely. So Thursday morning, pancakes, way too many of them, and it takes all day to digest, but at least you're not running Friday morning.
Yeah.
And then by Saturday, this is, again, N equals 1, just for Charlie. If I had a really big carb-loaded breakfast, and then I just kind of almost snacked the next 2 days, I always had my best runs on Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah. And so, but I learned that through looking at my data. 2 days before were more important than the day before.
So I'm glad you say that because I was gonna tie that back because you are fancy when it comes to data and whatnot, but there's nothing that that somebody can't learn
Right.
and use in their individual lives. And so there's a spectrum of like familiarity, we'll call it. And so I'm somewhere, we'll call it in the middle. And you're on the top end, and then there's people who are just getting into it. So this is a step-by-step process to get to where you're at. And as long as you take a little step every day, it's definitely possible. But so,
well, yeah,
just
but
that insight-
let's take that. Let's empower the average person. Okay, you don't have to create an algorithm to come to the same conclusion. I had my best run ever last Sunday. I'm being honest.
like last Sunday,
Yeah, it was actually two Sundays ago. Two Sundays ago, I went and ran a place up here called Percy Warner. It's incredibly hilly, and I was floating. I felt literally like I was floating, and I finished that run. If I want to take a data-driven approach without even looking at data, the best thing to do is to recall what I did the few days before to get me to that. And that's what I did. I didn't look at my data. I was just like, what have I done to feel so amazing today? Did I sleep well last night? Yeah, I slept okay. But when I went back, I literally set myself up perfectly from a nutrition standpoint. And I went for a walk the day before. I didn't, run a lot, but I notice if I run really hard one day, do a little bit the next day, that third day, I'm optimal.
okay.
And again, this is long distance running.
Yeah, but you had the data to look at, to compare, to figure out, but that includes like your food data. And so you used a database to answer a question. And so we may not be in the position to create our own databases in that same kind of way, but we could get there. And if we do, then we could answer some really, really specific questions that lead to actual action.
Yeah,
but lead to action.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a part of the whole like DW or KWID or
DIKW.
Yeah,
DIKW, which yes, we'll have to refresh ourselves in the next episode on DIKW, which is obviously data, information, knowledge to wisdom.
Yeah, and then wisdom and action are the same thing.
Absolutely.
But that's I feel like that's a really good example of like the data told you something, and then if you ran really well this past weekend, I assume you followed the instructions that the data gave you.
Yeah, but again, that was a case because we've talked about this before. I don't need data a lot of times now for nutrition because I've been tracking data for so long. So reflection is all I needed.
Okay,
and I knew what I did the 2 days before. I didn't go look at my data, because I don't track my food anymore. Remember, I'm a recovering tracker. I try not to do it as much. But I knew what I did. I knew I didn't drink a bunch of bourbon and then try to run the next morning, which that'd be a nice experiment, I think.
I don't know about that.
I'm going to try it tonight and we'll see how it goes. Okay. But that's good enough. And that's what I want to make sure people understand is you don't have to be fancy at this to think different with data. And data can just be a reflection of what you've done over the last 2 days. And why is that not good? And then when you see it repeating over and over again, now it's a trend. And that trend is that's the knowledge component of the DIKW model. Knowledge is all about the fact that you're doing reflections either with data or just through your experiences, and you're seeing a trend. Now you're saying, okay, obviously this is a recipe for success for me. So then you repeat it again and it works. Now you're into the action part, the wisdom, because you're now using your data, which again is just whatever you use to capture reality, reflection, the data itself. You pulled it from Strava, you went to the health app, whatever it was, and now you're using that to make better decisions. So where do I get all of that data? So I want to bring it back to the topic today because I got excited about the actionable parts of data there. Or you did too, by the way, with your actually actionable conclusion. But I think of my data when I think of what I use on a regular basis. There's probably 4 or 5 categories. And I'm going to say a couple and I'm going to miss a bunch. But obviously, we've already talked about nutritional or health data. And it's stored mostly in a phone or a cloud app. So I'd have to download it. I care about my transaction data in terms of money. That lives in the cloud almost exclusively. I even use an app called You Need a Budget. And so it pulls directly from a cloud application with my bank directly into this cloud application. So I don't usually have my transaction data local on my computer. My pictures, that's data that I really care about. And then probably another one would be my calendar. again, cloud-based, right? I don't think I have data directly on my computer. I don't know where Apple keeps.
It's all cloud.
It's all cloud, right?
Yeah,
it's all in the
'cause
iCloud.
It's all synced.
Yeah. So what other types of data is there about an individual that you might think about?
I mean,
Email's another one.
yeah, any kind of communication is a digital record. It's data and stuff. Especially like emails. Email's a tricky one, or any kind of texting or anything like that, because there are, oftentimes commitments that are made there, and you can always go back to them. And so if you don't have the record of it, then you can't point to it if there's ever discrepancy or anything like that. But yeah, email's pretty ubiquitously in the cloud these days. I think there are some organizations that have like on-prem servers that still run really old Exchange, but I don't think anybody really does that anymore.
Well, security and speed will determine whether you need local stuff or not. A lot of times. So, there is always going to be a latency between something in the cloud and your local application. So, whether it's bank transactions, which I think those are all now cloud-based, but, they had to be local at some point because of the speed of things. So there is still reasons you want things locally as opposed to only in the cloud. Can I talk about community type data and get people actionable yet? Are we getting there, or what else about individual stuff? I want to make sure that we get.
I think that the only thing I would say about personal stuff is like if you have like I write stuff, like I journal and all that kind of stuff, and so having a good place for that to live and having it backed up is very important, because I feel like there's a lot of value in that. And so it's like how do you take notes and how do you back those notes up, because those notes ultimately come into data. And that's how we manage this podcast, is through that same type of thing. So we share files, we share notes, we share a lot of technology to make this thing happen pretty smoothly. Mostly
cloud-based so that it can sync automatically. Charlie makes a change. I see it literally right in front of us right now using a Google Doc to do that, which is, if you're going to do things that are for collaboration, I mean, is there anything better than Google Docs these days?
We tried OneDrive, but it took too long to sync it took too long to sync. And so we were getting off page, and it creates that discrepancy page where it's like,
does.
Hey,
yeah,
this is different. I don't know what to do with it. Please tell me.
Yeah, because if it's not saving dynamically, which means at that exact millisecond, then every time I make a change, it has to wait. You don't see it until it's uploaded and then brought back down to your computer. And we were seeing it to be 5 minutes sometimes, and that just wasn't working.
But to your point earlier, OneNote is a very old application.
It is.
And the way that I have it set up is I still have a notebook that's in a spot that's just a file that it interacts with.
So you keep your notes where?
I keep my notes in OneDrive. So it's the
as
notes
a OneNote, or
it's a OneNote file in OneDrive, and then OneDrive is saved locally and in the cloud too.
I gotcha.
And then I've got it backed up with Dropbox too.
Gotcha. All right. So where you get your data from locally, a lot of times it can be through your account. So if you have a Strava account for running, even though you only play with the app, if you actually want to download that data, you might have to go somewhere else. It sounded like you downloaded your health data directly from the app. Is that correct?
Yeah, just the health app.
Okay. And I haven't done that directly before. Did it send it as an email or?
So I saved it to my OneDrive from the actual app.
Okay.
And it downloaded, like I said, in a zip file. It was pretty easy.
Yeah. And a lot of times now, I mean, there's so many hooks in things. In other words, there's a share button for every app, for everything you do. So you pretty much can save data from your phone anywhere. And I think it's, a lot of times I forget that your phone is more of a device these days than a computer, because I still feel like I'm doing most of my data stuff on a computer, but probably most people don't. Most people are they're definitely viewing all of their data more from a computer or from a phone these days than a computer.
Yeah, just whatever the app gives us.
Yeah, and of course, like email, social, even social media. Do you download any of your social media stuff?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I wonder if the young kids do it these days.
I used to on like back when I first started using Facebook, and people would tag me in a photo, I'd save the photo.
Yeah.
And every now and again, if it's a good one, I'll save it. But for the most part, I don't worry about it because I just assume it'll always be there.
You just assume it's always, and I think that's the mentality of probably an 18-year-old these days, is that they just think it's going to be there forever.
So
in that
calling me
company. No, I'm not calling you young at all. I'm just projecting out that there are youngins out there.
I'm basically 18.
You're basically 18. If you're 18, then I'm probably still almost 50.
Probably.
Yeah, I feel like it at least. So I think it's important to talk about, we keep talking about I need data. And a lot of times I get a lot of people that want to be empowered. And so I'm going to switch over to the community level type stuff.
Okay.
And there are great data sources here in the United States. Something that's interesting is I flew over to Northern Ireland about a month-ish ago. And when I was there, they have a unique health ID number. And getting all of your health data is really easy in Northern Ireland because it's all connected. And I was like, wow, because we don't, right? If you want all of your health data, I'm talking about from hospitals and clinics, you'd have to go to each one individually.
So I know why that is. But do you think most people do?
Probably not. So go ahead, help us.
It's just that each healthcare organization has usually built their own software, and they house their data in a way that's unique to them. And they probably are using such an old piece of software that they can't connect it in any kind of meaningful way that's dynamic, other than just giving you a snapshot. Because this is more in your forte or on your side of the fence. But I would assume that you would want like a system that's homogenous across all of healthcare.
Sure.
And so everybody's just feeding into that one system. And right now it's thousands of different systems, and each company has their own processes and how you access it and what you can access and all this other kind of stuff, apart from what HIPAA dictates, obviously.
Right. But why would a hospital conglomerate want to work with another one? Why would one hospital want to work with another one? Remember, what is data? It's currency, right? It's valuable. So by giving it to somebody else, they're now giving away their value to a certain point. But more important, it's the privacy issue is what I hear mostly from hospital corporations. It's really not more than that. They would like to sometimes, but in the United States, we're not socialized medicine. Northern Ireland, they do have government distributed medicine there. So that's why it's one there. But the difference here is we are better at getting publicly available data it's more census level type stuff. So yes, I might be able to see my individual information in Northern Ireland, but here in the United States, I can get data that's aggregated at the U.S. Census Tract level, the zip code level, the city level. That's really good and really diversified. And so a couple of different places I get a ton of data. The census data. If you go to census.gov/data, you'll be amazed at the different data that they put up there. And the one that is probably the most valuable to people like me it's called ACS, American Consumer Survey. So every year they're doing a survey, and they're not getting everybody in the United States, but every year they do a certain number of people, and these questions really give you insight into what's happening right now in our communities. And then they aggregate that up to the U.S. Census Tract level. So let me break this down really simple. If you think about the largest component of the United States, it's the United States, right? And so if I just said, what is the average or the median household income for the U.S., that'd be one number, and that's one number only,
Sure.
right? If I then break it down into the next components, and forgetting about regions of the United States, but it would be state level, right? And now I could, if I said I want to know the state median household income, I would get 50 or 51 different ones if you include DC in that. Then I go down into the county level. So now I break it down one step further, and now you have however many counties within a state, and I could find out the median household income at that level. Then you go to the city level, and within a county, there's obviously a lot of different cities. And then within a city, normally there is multiple zip codes. And so most of the data that we get will be at the zip code level. So a lot of times you'll hear zip code level. But then you go even farther down, the last usually granular level before you get to the individual is U.S. Census Tract. And so just Google U.S. Census Tract and you'll be able to see your area. But like in Nashville, I think there's well over 70 U.S. Census Tracts. They try to get it down to just a couple of thousand-ish here or there, and they vary in size. But there's usually multiple U.S. Census Tracts within one zip code. So if I look at a zip code, I can tell you something about it. But if I have U.S. Census Tract level data, now I can literally get down to it's almost like neighborhood level.
Yeah.
Census data gets down, in most cases, to the U.S. Census Tract level.
That's cool.
It is. And now some of it's projections, right? Because you don't have a ton of data from every single U.S. Census Tract. So they have to do some statistics behind it. Some might be averages. And in most cases, just so that people know, if you ever go and are playing with this data, it is a rolling 5-year average. So if I'm looking at 2020 data, it actually includes data from 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And that's giving you the snapshot of a community at that moment. And so, again, if you were to go to census.gov/ and then just type in ACS, trust me, you're going to get to the American Consumer Survey data, and it gives you just absolutely amazing, like median household income. How many people moved out of a city this year? How many people that were Black moved out of this city? How many people that were white moved out of the city? All of these different things that you're like, wow. It gives you a lot of really in-depth information. Percentage of people with bachelor's degrees, high school diplomas, PhDs, all data that's really, really interesting and insightful.
So if I'm a nonprofit or something along those lines, because you've talked about, it's not cooperation, it's, what's the word you use when co-opportunities? Like if I'm
collective impact.
Collective impact.
There you go. Yes.
So if I'm a nonprofit and I'm looking for a way to be collectively impactful, aside from working with other groups, I can use this data to find other people to work with potentially.
Yeah, actually the best source for data, if you're talking collective impact, usually means you care about social determinants of health. So social determinants of health are data points, or it is things that relate to your health that are not specifically medical. In other words, physical activity, your nutrition, where you live, are you urban versus rural? Those are more social determinants. The best data source for that is called the CDC Places data. Okay, so CDC, we all know Center for Disease Control, right? They have a data source that goes down to the U.S. Census Tract level. That gives you the percentage of people that are binge drinkers, the percentage that are smokers, the percentage with people with high blood pressure. It is my number one statistic for hypertension. I use it because it's everywhere. I have it for every single U.S. Census Tract in the country, where I only have claims data specifically for Nashville. So it is a great source. And I mean, it gets the percentage with diabetes, the number of people that the percentage that get wellness checks per year. Again, it's all based on survey type data. It's a rolling average over time. But what I do with that kind of data is right now I'm comparing, 2020 to 2015, because again, remember I said it's a 5-year average. So I feel really good about the differences between 2015 and 2020. And so those are ways that I will go and get data from both of those at the U.S. Census Tract level, and then I can see how things have changed over time.
So on a community level, you're actively working in with these databases then?
Oh, absolutely. And what I do, of course, is I download them once because they only are published once a year. And I download them into my data warehouse, and then I connect it to education data, crime data, any other data sources that I have, including claims data for hypertension or prescription type stuff. As we start looking at the mental health space here, and so those are all now interconnected. So I don't even know sometimes. I actually brought up one of my data dictionaries, which is just a list of all of the features I'm looking at. And so I've got a data set right now that I'm playing with that has 123 different features in it. And it is from the Census Business Patterns data set, which again, you can get from US census.gov, American Consumer Survey data. I've got CDC data in here. I've got the Nashville City dashboard. I've got EPA data. So I've gone to all of those sites, pulled it into one data warehouse, and then that's what I play with. And I do it every day. I'm in that data every day.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it is cool. And now my main mission for 2023 is to give it back to everybody else. I want everybody to have all of the data that I have in an easy to use web platform where you just go to ask the question that is on your mind, the dilemma, and then we give you the data and so you don't even know where it's coming from. You just know it's answering your question.
Yeah. So you're putting your database to work.
I'm going to try.
Or your data warehouse to work.
Yeah, and it's an ambitious project, and it's going to look beautiful. It has to. I don't want. Here's why. Going to US, the U.S. Census website, it's a government website.
I know what you mean.
It doesn't look pretty.
It looks like
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, okay.
For sure. But I do think it is worth looking at. You can go to U.S. Bureau of Labor, and they have amazing data about workforce. You can get traffic data. Again, it's aggregated up. It's not perfect, but it is a glimpse into a community. So why not? I mean, you can get data that tells you how many people commute out of the city and how many commute into the city. And that's really important information, especially somebody that travels 60 minutes every day, knowing how many people leave with me from my current town to where I work. And so I think that data is really, really important to look at. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, it's so much.
Which is why we're going to be able to have so much fun for so long, because there's so much data out there. There's so many things you can do with data. I'll tell you, we could cover so much additional stuff, but I'm almost like everything I look at on our list here today, Charlie, is an episode.
Yeah.
It really is. And I know we've probably gone a little bit too far, but what else you think is that burning question if we have to know about needing data to go get data?
So as we've talked through all of the stuff today, like in my mind, I've created a path. So everybody's walking their data path, or their, your data journey, as you've called it before. And so at the beginning, like we talked a lot about a lot of fancy stuff, but just go look at your app. Go look at some of the data you generate, because we've talked about this before. Like you just start playing with the data, and that helps you familiarize yourself in ways that you can start to like draw insights and new questions and stuff like that. And so I feel like that same kind of curiosity should be applied to whatever you've got. So if you're on Android, it's the Fit app, and if you're on iOS, it's the Health app. Just give those things a look and see what it tracks. If you sleep with your watch on, it's collecting sleep data ever since this new iOS 16 and watchOS 9 gives you detailed sleep information that'll show how you go from awake to core sleep to REM sleep to deep sleep, and it'll show those sleep cycles in a way that it didn't before.
Yeah.
and just look at it, keep up with it. Notice how you feel. Like, do that introspection, because even if it's on a short-term thing, you were calling it. You weren't saying introspection, but you were calling it something else.
Reflection.
Yeah, reflection.
Yeah.
So reflection is just looking at data, or like, consulting your gut to make a decision, but based off of the data that you can recall. Now, it's not going to be as consistent as if it was written down, but it's still an activity that is positive and gets your mind in that right state of or that right frame of mind in order to really think about how what you're about to look at is going to change your behavior or empower you.
Yeah, and so I'm going to walk through, since sleep is on my mind, since I've got that Oura ring now, I'm going to walk through that, and so you see the different levels, because I think it's important to identify where the gray line is, like we talked about in the beginning. So so again, let's say I'm interested in my sleep. My dilemma is I want to be more productive in the day, so I want my sleep to be as optimal as possible. So I could start with just reflection type stuff. How do I wake up every day? How did I feel? What did I do the day before? And if I can keep track of all that stuff in my head, okay, that's great. But let's say I want data from a device to help me out. Now I have to decide, where is data being captured? Is it being captured? And if it's not, how am I going to capture that data? So if I think about it, so you mentioned your watch can track your sleep. My ring is now tracking my sleep. And then the third way, honestly, is my bed tracks my sleep. I've got one of those Sleep Number beds where it actually can give you the statistics. So I got to figure out, where do I want to get that? And if I don't have any of those for whatever my dilemma is, now I have to manually track that myself. And I just wake up every morning and saying, I got 7.5 hours of sleep. I felt terrible. And then I could just create a spreadsheet. So if I can get the data from a dynamic app of some sort, great. If I can remember it just by reflection, great. But if not, now I've got to actually create that data source. Then it comes to, okay, now I want to actually see the data for the insights. And if I have an app that shows my Oura Ring data, is that good enough? Is looking at the app good enough? Is looking at it in the health data part of your iPhone good enough? And if it's not, that's when you went and downloaded the data so that you can see it in a different view. Does that resonate? So
just from an iOS perspective, like a couple of months ago, all you got was like, I was in bed or I wasn't. That was the extent of your sleep data. And so you could measure hours in bed, and that's a good metric to look at. But then with this new update, I get the levels of sleep. And so that greater detail lets me know, did any part of my sleep cycle get disrupted? Because we were talking about earlier in the week that, and I looked at my own sleep data after, and there are nights that I'm missing my deep sleep in a big way.
I always get deep sleep. It probably tells you I'm tired when I go to bed, or I'm old, one of the two, both, by the way. But when I go right to bed, I go straight into deep sleep.
Yeah.
And then I don't have any deep sleep after 12 a.m.-ish usually. And that's when rapid eye movement, my REM sleep really starts. But I normally have no REM sleep in the beginning. And so this was a great example of I was empowered to learn. That was what the data did for me, because I'm like, I don't get what the difference between deep and REM sleep are. Yeah. Why is it always in the beginning? Why is it not in the end? So I went and started Googling, and I started identifying that deep sleep means you're being you need the rest to recuperate your body. Yeah. And then REM sleep is getting you ready for the next day. Is that right?
Deep sleep is your anabolic state. And so all your recovery, so you like to run, I like to work out. So we need deep sleep for maximum recovery, especially at our age. Okay. When you're younger, it's easy. The recovery, it comes quicker. Like we're definitely experiencing that. But that's so that turned into my goal once I realized that wasn't happening. So now I want deep sleep. And so I'm more empowered to do that, but I don't really know what's impacting that deep sleep, except for I do. Because I reflected and I was like, oh, well, I drank before I went to bed. And that's that's impacting my sleep
You don't
cycle.
get as much deep sleep,
Right.
so you had to do those type of trials. Isn't it interesting how data allowed you to go from worrying about sleep to deep sleep? Without data, you would not even. There's no way you would even think about how do I affect my deep sleep part.
Right, and but it also gives you an understanding because, like you said earlier, it empowers you to learn about a situation because you've got think about a metric or something that you're familiar with as like a grip in climbing. So you've got something to hold on to, and then each new thing you learn is just another handhold or foothold or whatnot, and then eventually you're on it and you're in it and all that kind of stuff. And so you understand how it's impactful and how it's not. And so in that same kind of way, the deep sleep is impactful to me now in a way that's going to change my behavior, but I'm still missing something. And so that something is like, well, what else could possibly be doing this? And so exporting that data and then potentially being able to compare physical activity to the sleep specifically.
Exactly.
Because the only thing it lets you do in the app is respiratory rate and heart rate during sleep. And so if I want to compare the physical aspect of it, then I've got to do more. I've got to come out of the app into my own database.
There you go.
And then figure it out from there. But then I've also got to figure out to your point earlier, I've got to create a metric of did I sleep well or not did I sleep well? Did I drink before? Did I eat before? Mm-hmm. And then how do I feel the next morning?
Yeah, see, in the Aura app, I can add tags. So I can even put exercise late night. Mm-hmm. I can put alcohol. It doesn't allow me to differentiate levels of alcohol or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so it's got at least 50 different tags that I can put on things. Now I'm not consistent with it, so then it becomes data that I don't use. If I got to be consistent so that when I see, okay, every time I drank, what did it do to me? And so my thing is I get my deep sleep, but I don't get my REM sleep. So now I've got to figure out what am I doing to not get that REM sleep correctly. And I wake up a ton after midnight. I do. And maybe it's dogs, maybe it's just me. But there's something about once my deep sleep is over, I don't sleep well. So all things that are based on the data that I have. So I think that it's really cool. And I think we're blurring over to where we want to go with our next few episodes here. But I think if is there anything else we need to talk about the needing data?
No, not that we won't cover in later episodes for sure.
And I think it's, again, important to know, do I need data in the first place? Mm-hmm. If I do, can I just view it in an app? Or if I really need to dive deep into it or integrate it with other data sources, which is what it sounds like you're doing, now I need to download it and put it into a form that allows me to analyze it in a certain way. And then, of course, the last step would be to do what I do, which is, of course, I bring it in and do some of the data science techniques to identify which features matter the most for blah, 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 blah. And I think that all of those steps become really important for understanding if you even need data in the first place. If you do, where do you get it? Or do I have to create it myself? And then third, how do I view it? And how do I use that and turn it into, of course, some type of action?
Yeah, I'm going to need your help on some of those data science techniques.
Oh, are you going to give me all of your data and I get to scrutinize what Charlie Yielding does on a daily basis?
I don't know.
I think we should. And then we'll have to post all of that and show it to everybody. And I'll do the same thing. We should do that. We should have a nice little challenge where we do our health-ish data challenge.
Well, I'm planning on getting better.
Yeah. Data allows you to do it, and we'll see if data gets us there or makes it worse. Maybe we think too much about it.
I'm sure there's a line.
There's a line. I'm with you. So any other parting shots?
I think that's it for me today.
Oh, that's great. It was so good to get back into it here as we get ready for the new year. And one more episode, Charlie, and we will call season 1 done. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, our goal was 10 episodes, and getting through 10 episodes is going to be great.
Wow. Well, again, thank you, everybody, for going on this journey with us. I think we've now laid the foundation, and we're going to talk about truly empowering people in that 10th episode. You don't want to miss that. So again, my name's Charlie Apigian.
And I'm Charlie Yielding.
And until next time.